Hello and welcome to FP Talks. I'm Farooq Pitafi. If you have not followed this channel so far, kindly do so. Also hit the bell icon so that whatever I post reaches you immediately. Believe you me, today the topic that I'm going to discuss, that is the Adani, Hindenburg and Sebi issue. I did not want to actually touch this issue with a biased poll, and B, even if I did, I did not actually want to make this video today. But there's a reason why I'm doing it. Why I did not want to actually make this issue, discuss this issue. That is primarily because the power of Adani Group and then Modi government as well. So why alienate people when you can actually live without doing that? And secondly, given that yesterday my elder daughter's O levels results came, and she made this father very proud because of that. And by the way, I haven't seen so many A's in one result or A stars. So I was really happy and I wanted to just live in the moment. But then, because I keep on following Indian media and the way they mishandle every story, and because of a lack of competence, b even when there is competence, many of them actually go have the problem of missing forest for trees. So what I thought, that there is a bigger picture that is missing, right? Story so far, we know last year in January, Hindenburg actually came up with this report on how shoddily Adani is actually cooking its books, and how it is manipulating its stocks, and how exactly its real value is not what it was supposed to be. So Hindenburg research, of course, it borrows the name from that blimp that went down. It has cultivated a history, and this image of these people who are actually doing God's work. They go and study companies which are weak or which are actually cooking books or manipulating, and then they what do? They go and they first of all take advanced positions in their stocks, futures, and then they release their report, and meticulously documented report. And once it is done, they simultaneously also short their stocks. So what happens is that they actually highlight a negativity that is going on, and then they also profit by doing that also. And they have a very good track record before Adani Corporation, Adani Group, and they actually brought down many huge giants that were there, and eventually many of the CEOs were arrested also. But they came up with this report. I read that report thoroughly, cover to cover. This time they have actually come up with something else. I haven't read it so much, but I know what the content is. A, because of the summaries that have been published in the papers, and then also because of all the commentary that I keep on seeing. But there's a bigger picture, and I've been actually plugged into the world markets, and every day I interact with various movers and shakers who might be all over the world. So I get a broader picture, right? And believe me, the origin of this conversation that I'm actually sharing with you, it doesn't start in India. It was essentially about these projections about global recession, and I kept on asking why the hell everybody seems to be projecting that there's going to be, excuse me, there's going to be a global recession. And the reason is, we know that the whole world is going through this hyper inflationary cycle, and because of that, there's little chance that all of a sudden, from a very hot position, the economy would cool down to such an extent that it becomes a global recession. So what we did was we went from country to country, market to market. America's market does not have any fundamental problem. Then European markets don't have any fundamental problem. We can talk about countries also, France, Germany, others. UK has a problem or had a problem. Now it is on the way of being mended, but even that doesn't have the kind of exposure that it would cause any kind of serious damage to the global economy. Then we came to Asia. In Asia, of course, whenever you talk about various countries apart from India, you talk about Japan and China. In Japan, we know that economy is not hunky-dory. Of course, it has been going on since 90s, but then there is some kind of equilibrium there, and that's why it doesn't seem to actually threaten. We know what the faults are; they're exposed, and they are kind of sort of factored and baked in. Now, China, whenever grand, situation was worsening, at that time we thought that there might be some structural problems. And of course, what happened to Alibaba and all, but all of them actually found a way to balance out. Evergrande was actually taken care of more or less. Then China's production is also on a good speed. It keeps on growing, and there is no sign of slowing down. Whatever problems there might be, they have this very efficient bureaucracy that actually goes after these issues and they take care of it, right? And then comes the country called India. And now, if we want to actually sit there and pretend that India's economy does not have any structural problem and no contagion at all, or at least doubts about a contagion, then we are actually fooling ourselves. Why? Because we know that the non-performing asset issue 10 years ago, 11 years ago, how huge it was. And to his credit, Dr. Raghuram Rajan, when he was the RBI's chief, was very capable, and he tried to tackle this issue. But then what happens? Government changes, all of a sudden, because of the change of government, Raghuram Rajan is let go. And after that, you have this 10 years, 11 years of opacity. And that's why we don't know where exactly does that problem lie, right? So there's a structural doubt about what is happening, and that will stay because we know, everybody knows that the numbers are cooked because the kind of growth figures we see and the kind of lack of employment or cost of living crisis that we have seen, especially in the working class, middle class, lower middle class, that is very clear that something is the numbers are not trustworthy. And it's okay, South Asians are known for cooking numbers, especially when there's a strong man on the helm, and their USP, unique selling proposition, is not economy, but some kind of ideology, some kind of muscular image, right? And then the problem is also that all of a sudden, two groups that were kind of part of the problem, especially Ambani group, right? They all of a sudden become these larger than life, structures or entities, and they are there, they are dominating the conversation, they are dominating the business also. And then, of course, Adani also. Adani's exponential growth might have done many things to other businesses in India because it seems to be doing everything now under the sun. But what it has created. And by the way, don't fool yourself that all other companies are like hunky dory, everything is fine. We know what happened with the coup attempt in Tata Group, right? And Cyrus Mistry was his name, right? And the way he actually died in a car crash coming back from Ahmedabad when the Tatas were reclaiming their company. So, you know that a lot of shoddy things go on there as well. And had something of the similar sort happened in US or Europe, perhaps everybody would have been obsessing about that. But it's okay. It doesn't at least affect global economy or our future. So what has happened is that somehow Adani, initially Ambani, and Ambanis have their own flaws as well. The biggest problem with the South Asian businessmen is they want to rub it in your face, right? Ambani is the kind of wasteful expenditure that was covered wall to wall for a son's marriage. That also should be enough to actually give you a turn, and of course, the entire world is watching. But again, they are basically today they're not part of the conversation. The biggest problem is Adani. And the strike rate, if you look at how Hindenburg has been actually achieving whatever it is, it has been more or less 100%, right? Almost 100%. But I can't speak for fractions or point something or that kind of failure, but they have been very successful. So what changed this time? Why is it that when they spotted a fatal flaw in a company and they highlighted it, it did not happen. The company actually took a dive or it took a hit, but it has, in a year, it has almost recovered everything. And why is it that the misery of one company does not seem to affect the stock market itself? Many believe that there is some kind of manipulation that is going on. So this time, when Hindenburg actually, and look at these geniuses. I mean, if you want to protect something, you could have done it by being quiet, exactly doing something similar to what about like that we saw in electoral bonds issue. By the way, that if you start connecting all these things, it becomes the world's and history's greatest scandal ever, right? But forget about that also. They effectively managed that crisis and it went away, or somehow they managed to deflect attention. Now, Adani's manipulation has been exposed through what Sebi was doing, right? And especially, and by the way, there are connotations because this contamination has reached another group, that is BlackRock. Larry Fink has been criticized for many things, right? Especially from hard right, and then the cost of advertising real estate all over the world. And people like me at least thought that, okay, there might be agenda driven discussion, so I'm not going to touch that matter. Of course, then the conspiracy theorists actually keep on talking about the woke agenda and so many other things, how Netflix actually behaves, how censorship actually goes on around the world. So that was essentially a talking point of hard right. That, by the way, is deeply aligned. Hard right discussion is deeply aligned with BJP's trolls all over the world. But even then, you have to come back to Adani Group. Adani Group also dubbed it in your face. While it should be investigated. It's operations should have been restricted. It goes to Haifa, it goes to Colombo, it goes to Bangladesh. In Bangladesh also, I don't know what happened to the deal of expensive electricity, coal-based electricity that was being supplied. The word had that perhaps there's going to be some kind of renegotiation. I don't know if that happened or not. But Adani Group also exposed itself further and further to scrutiny, and because of that, of course, Hindenburg also wanted to know what went wrong, and they started studying, and then there are whistleblowers, and along comes these whistleblower documents that have exposed the exposure of Sebi's own leadership, and these things are serious, and they are going to be apologies. There was a message that flashed, so I had to actually just look at that as well. Along comes on one side this exposure is taking place, right? And then what happens? All of a sudden, Hindenburg is enemy of civilization or India, and it wants to bring down India itself. The problem is that if there is this fear about India's economic stability, and there are other companies that might be exposed to a contagion, and the world essentially, because India is so integrated, would want to help India in ensuring there are two ways, right? The world wouldn't want any kind of recession for a long time, right? So naturally, whenever there is a contagion and whenever there's manipulation, usually what you have is a bubble, and those bubbles are not sustainable. Eventually, they explode. Once they deflate or explode or collapse, what happens is the entire economy plunges into recession. And because that happens, this might actually take a lot of Western stakeholders. By the way, NPA crisis also had exposure from global lenders, right? Other businesses, and there's a separate video that we can make. I think in the past also I have actually mentioned this, but today I am just trying to actually point out that this unfortunate desire to protect Adani Group or Adani Group or whatever you may call it, whether the D is hard or soft, and Sebi and other people that might be everywhere. Of course, $100 billion or more than that worth net worth ensures that you have plants all over the world. But because you are trying to do that, the world isn't able to help you. There are two ways the world is going to react. If your economy is collapsing, it can come in and try to recover or help you recover. If that does not happen, what do? They cut their losses and they insulate themselves from your exposure or your collapse. Right? These are two methods that are possibly available. Of course, there are worst possible scenarios also, but I don't want to go there. My point is, India is a 1.4 billion population country. It has huge economy, and then there are people whose livelihoods and lives actually depend on this. And as we progress in this discussion, I'm going to go towards the philosophical aspects of what might happen and what are the serious threats to humanity in coming days, right? Because of this kind of lack of transparency. But um, in these two scenarios that I was mentioning, the problem is because there's this huge overhang of a company that for some reason Indian government thinks that it needs to protect against justifiable and rational scrutiny. What is happening? It is building all these systems around it, and because of that, all the transparency goes out of the window. And when that happens, so does the trust of world market in your market's capacity to keep moving. You can of course blackmail, you can use your influence elsewhere, but then all of a sudden, if not all of a sudden, at least gradually they start cutting those precious points as well, and they go away too. So, what is going to happen if this crisis lingers on? If Sebi's leadership, especially this lady, is not actually shown the door, if India cannot restore trust in its regulators, and remember earlier when I talked about Raghuram Rajan, that is another issue. We have seen what happened with Sebi. And then there are other regulators or other important influencers like RBI. Again, RBI also has a trust deficit, especially the way it has been actually covering over, papering over these NPAs and all. So, what happens now? If it lingers on, and it will, because Hindenburg is not going to take this hit lightly. These guys actually committed the cardinal sin of, uh, instead of saving whatever you wanted to save and ignoring Hindenburg, they started attacking it, right? And that Shoga's notices and all that kind of crap. Because of that, you have actually offended many people. And that is not all. Remember, capitalism functions through competition. What is the idea of Adam Smith's invisible hand? That if everybody is pursuing their selfish interest, the sum total of their competition, mutual jealousies, and desire to curtail others will ensure that there is no monopoly, right? And the biggest story of the last two decades is that we have utterly failed to contain, monopolization. Look at Adani himself. I mean, he's everywhere, and then he has media also. So with that kind of influence, what happens? You actually paralyze the system, game the system, and paralyze it. That means you are actually working on borrowed time because your business model is shoddy. Had there been a similar kind of manipulation in any other company, trust me, India's market would have been discussed more directly by Hindenburg, other companies, sharks of that sort. And there are many. Hindenburg is not the only one. But that is not happening. That means that the books, and by the way, read the first report that came last year. It, in granular detail, it exposes the whole shoddy business model. So, remember there was a time when not war terror, Afghan jihad was going on, and there was a bank called BCCI, Bank of Credit and Commerce International, headed by Pakistani, that actually became big. And then it was realized that a lot of money from smuggling of drugs, smuggling of weapons, and then of course Western money that was sent to Pakistan for combating the Soviet influence in Afghanistan, that ended up in personal accounts. So what happens? After the war is over, after the USSR has decided to actually withdraw from the region, regulators go, they crack down, and they actually take all their resources and walk away. They thought that it was their money, and that's why they walked away with that. Something similar has happened with Adani's exponential growth, and that's why it has become such a big thing. So what will happen? Eventually they'll get it. They'll get him, right? But there is a better way to approach the matter. First of all, restore the credibility of your institutions. And how does it happen? I don't know what is the extent of Modi government's exposure to Adani's operations, but it is high time that they start actually containing that exposure and start cutting their losses. Because look, this thing has layers. One layer is Adani itself, right, which is a core. Then there is political exposure, right? Then there is another layer of the country's or market's own exposure. Then comes a region, then comes a world economy. So, if you, and by the way, here, when I said that I'm going to talk about the philosophical aspects also, I'm going to basically talk about the humanitarian aspect because there was greed led us to a recession in 2008, and that practically destroyed two generations. Generation X, which was already working but learning the ropes because they were young, and millennials who were actually coming up. And because of that, so much has happened. So if these layers are not taken care of, and you can do that by actually taking care of one core company, and simplest thing is bring in the antitrust process, and deconstruct the entire body and divide it into smaller groups, and then you have more visibility as to where the shoddy things are going on, and then you can contain it, and the rest become separate entities and they can thrive. Maybe one day Adani has a space to come back, but today the concern is that this white elephant will fall, and when it falls it will take the ecosystem with it, right? So just look at the domino effect. um, if this issue lingers on, and if the government of India does not, and I'm not kidding, I've spoken to at least 10 experts in DC, in UK, in Europe on the matter before doing this video. One of the reasons why I'm doing it right now. And I thought that nobody is actually paying that kind of heed to these atmospherics, right? By the way, I've been dismayed by the quality of discussion going on in Indian media, but then YouTube is great in one aspect that uh, while it might actually censor people like me, suppress our numbers, exposure, but it does something great for you as a consumer. Its algorithm is great. It actually keeps on throwing up when it knows what your interest might be. It throws up the results or actually suggestions which are very really wonderful. So I was dismayed because of the Bangladesh crisis, and then all the commentary on economics, everything seemed to be compromised. And then all of a sudden, I find this channel called Money Life. I think it is Money Life, and the commentary by Suchita Dalal. I don't know how to pronounce the names properly, so forgive me if I'm not correct. But that made me realize that India, and I was thinking, if Indian media has become so brain dead, where does it keep, where are the Indian minds now? Are they in think tanks? Because I know that their content also I'm not impressed. Even Fiki has gone down substantially since Modi ji actually took power because of the nepotism and this opportunism effect. So, but I heard her commentary on Sebi issue, and I was really impressed that okay, India has chosen to keep its best minds on YouTube, right? But having said that, The point is, even then, the bigger picture is missing. The panic or the fear is just starting to set in. And going to actually tell you what happens now. This matter continues. If it continues, there will be more disrepute and distrust towards India's regulators. That would mean that whatever is coming from India and all these claims of growth and this business doing this thing great and that business doing that thing great, that actually falls to pieces. And because of that, investor waits and wants to see if there's going to be some kind of remedial action. And because there's no remedial action in sight, and because the Modi government, as usual, because of its very nature, doubles down, they start pulling their funding. And if that happens, the kind of economic, I mean, there are people who might be actually, because of their political interest, might be slow to withdraw, like the Arab countries that have been invested in India. Of course, they are new to this whole thing, but eventually everyone will pull out. And this happens within months. It doesn't happen in years. Your economy automatically starts collapsing. The second thing is, okay, they don't do it. And then somehow, because Adani Group might be propped up, but they are adjacent companies. Every company, big company, especially these billion dollars and trillion-dollar companies, create an ecosystem around them, right? So something gives, and then starts collapse of house of cards. And because of that, your economy suffers, and your investors, foreign investors, also go broke, and because of that, a global recession sets in. And if that happens, lives will be destroyed. We are already on the cusp of a huge change, right? And what is that? We are on the cusp of the automation, AI, job displacement revolution, where a lot of jobs will just vanish. It has happened before our eyes. When I was a young man, I remember that every street corner used to have a video store. Every street corner used to have audio record shop, and then a music records shop, and then also these photography geniuses used to be very influential. All of a sudden, because of the digitization and internet, what happened? Video stores went away, music label shops went away. The photography shops essentially became printers because everything is now converted. And then came mobile, and it has taken so many other jobs as well. So you wouldn't know what hit you. And because you are empowering whom, you are empowering these hyper greedy businesses that are bent on destroying countries. I mean, what what will it take for you to be convinced that these people have actually wreaked havoc with India and India's image abroad, right? The only reason why I'm doing this program in English is I could have done it in Hindi, right? You know my proficiency in languages, but I did not, because I want to show that there is this element of faith. I'm not driving an agenda. I'm just trying to raise the alarm that India's economy come October is going to plunge headlong into a huge crisis. Already your national debt has risen beyond a tenable position. It is almost the same model as of Ambani's and Adani's, because they have assets, but their assets are nothing compared to the loans that they have taken, and that's why they keep on juggling everything. India will suffer. The first victims will be its own people. Then will be, you know, the biggest victim will be the diaspora, because if Modi government stays in power and if they keep on doubling down in saving Adani, that means that they will keep on pressing their diaspora to influence investors, companies, other entities to keep on reposing blind trust into entities like Adani. And what happens? Then these people come under scrutiny because every country, every company is going to work for their interest, and there's going to be some kind of oversight, and then those people start losing their jobs. In the end, if it becomes a global recession, that will be the time when companies, if they want to innovate, if they want to survive, will have to offload human resources, and they will have to go for automation. If that becomes a model, I don't know what happens to Adani, I don't know what happens to Ambani, I don't know what happens to India, but all over the world, it will mean total destruction. Now, let us talk about the philosophical aspects or the humanitarian aspect. I don't know how many of you have read the works of this intellectual and critic who actually took his life later on, Mark Fisher. His two books are great, right? The first one is called Capitalist Realism, and that is critique or this obsession with capitalism defining whatever goes on in your life. But his second book, Ghost of My Life, is amazing book because it speaks of something called slow cancellation of the future, and that's where our talk about the name explains everything, right? You thought that the future holds great opportunities for you, and then all of a sudden you just want to actually, you think it is within reach, and you try to grab it, and it actually disappears. This is what happened with Gen X. This is what happened with millennials because of what happened with this the subprime mortgage market collapse all over the world. Because of that, the recession that set in, the greed that was there. I'm sure that you have seen that movie called The Big, The Big Crash or something, right? The Big Shot, not The Big Shot. It's a great movie. Kind of documentary, also great acting, great actors, but it tells the story of how things were, part documentary, how things actually became shit. So now what happens is that finally, after millennials, we are in a position to offer Gen Z and Gen Alpha some kind of hope. And if we go into recession, buddy, that is the end of human civilization as we know it. Because then you have no reset button. Automation will set in, AI will set in. Already people like us well are predicting that singularity is near, and that's how things are actually going to become really horrible. By the way, another aspect that Mark Fisher actually talks about is because it is slow cancellation of the future. And remember that he's especially speaking in the regarding the art, and later we are going to talk a little bit about another book that speaks about fashion too. But the fact that art has lost its edge is primarily because that Capitalism, especially in its most virulent forms, dissolves culture around it, right? And because it does that, what does it do? According to Mark Fisher, it actually tries to or replace it with imitation culture, but that is essentially regulated by whom? By the big corporate interest, and because of that, you don't have the kind of space or the ability to keep moving on, and you don't see that kind of outbreak of new talent or new style, and that actually to takes us to another term called hauntology. You're haunted by the nostalgia of the past because that is the only tangible reality that is there, and you keep on trying to replicate the past cultural items, and you end up actually destroying everything that could be great. Now, I said fashion because there's another author, great author. I hope that many of you must have read his book called Fantasyland. But I'm not talking about Fantasyland. Fantasyland is about um, America's history, like but the history of the weird and about obsessions, supernatural obsessions and all. But another book of his, 2020 book, the author's name is Kurt Anderson, right? And the book is called Pure Evil Geniuses, right? And it starts with his realization that fashion over the past many decades hasn't changed. There's slight tinkering, but rest actually remains the same. So again, the same principle applies, that the interest that are stopping innovation because there is need for standardization. Now, think about your kids. I'm sure, like me, you have kids also. If you don't have, it's okay. But somebody you care deeply about, must have children. You don't want those children to go through the same traumas that Gen Z, God forbid Gen Z, that Generation X, my generation, and then the millennials actually went through. Their lives were destroyed. They couldn't own much. The student debts actually destroyed their lives, and many of them, even in high places, are still struggling with the same kind of debt. So, on one side, if this kind of collapse was to come, remember we have an example. Donald Trump, who actually won elections in 2016, and all indications were that the global markets are going to soar. And that is what kept on happening till the time he was in power, especially at least till the time COVID had not set in. After that, everything went wonky. But he was very effective in doing what he was doing at that time. So instead of actually markets soaring or going up, they tanked. Why? Because Modi government, in its infinite wisdom, thought that demonetization was a great idea. Remember that I mean, I don't want to use harsh language, but there are these strange beings that are associated, not all of them, but some of them in World Bank, in IMF, elsewhere. They keep on coming up with these weird ideas that demonetization will help in combating black money. And as was observed recently by one of the honorable justices of Supreme Court, a lady, I'm forgetting her name, that if the whole, the entire money came back, because there was this currency swap process, right? If that came back, so where did the black money go, right? Very legitimate question, and I don't think that Modi government has it in itself to answer such difficult questions. It destroyed MSME sector. It destroyed people's appetite for expenditure, and that's why all these numbers are so doubtful, right? But again, we are not. I mean, I have enough data on India's economy that I can create really huge panic. I don't want to do that. Right now, what I'm saying is Modi government should come to its senses. If it can't, it should be forced to come to its senses. If even that does not happen, it's a government on borrowed time. So somebody from his own party, please, somebody who is smart enough, please replace him and save India, because India is really facing this horrible possibility of economic collapse. And if that comes, it will take at least its neighbors along, and if it spreads further, which there is a chance of. Remember, I spoke about BlackRock. Now, because of this whole story, BlackRock, which already was under scrutiny, will come under further scrutiny. And this will continue because these asset managers, these huge funds, of course, there was a precursor of BlackRock as well, there are other companies too, they will not be able to withstand public scrutiny. So it is interest of everybody that A, not only in India, all over the world, this huge trillion dollar companies, especially the ones that don't have any hardware, base for their growth story, and are mostly speculative. I mean, Apple is an exception, Microsoft will be another exception. But all these huge giants that have been created, there has to be some kind of voluntary cooperation for trust busting, some kind of trust regulation, monopoly regulation. If that antitrust work does not take place, we as a civilization are screwed. Of course, there are other aspects to it. This crypto fad that is there, it is also an engine or similar kind of opacity that is going to be there. Of course, at its core, there are two things which are very important and they're trustworthy. One is blockchain technology itself. I think it is technology of the future because it creates the kind of backups that ensure that nothing can go awry. On the other side, the demand for a better mechanism to, send money from one country to another. But largely, it is essentially these spoiled brats, these billionaire czars who have actually sent their money, parked their money into these items, these uh, equities, so to speak, or for that matter, this um, instruments, right? And what will happen? What people like you and me actually go and follow, and we actually go for collecting crumbs that are actually dusted off their tables, and in the end, someday they'll decide to pull that money the day their negotiations with their government succeed, and they no longer need to actually hide that money, and they'll pull it, and your lives will be destroyed. So there has to be a better regulatory framework starting from the US on these matters. I think US is doing great at this moment. I hope that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris can both come to the agreement that there has to be a regulatory framework. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of problem because these companies are getting really, really predatory these days. On the other side, in India, Sebi, its chief, should go immediately. This matter now, Congress party and others are demanding JPC. I think JPC can be interesting process because it brings a lot of political attention to the matter. But then there have to be three or four, contingencies. That means that there should be more than one investigation. One, the Supreme Court. I hope ADR actually goes there, and they actually uh, forced them to do something about it. They did great with the electoral bond and with the election ballot system too. And it has to be done on what's footing. JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee also is a great idea. It can simultaneously work. Then, after you have actually cleansed, or I hope that if nothing happens, Supreme Court of India can push um, affect some kind of change at SEBI and other regulators, and ensure that those people are squeaky clean. And with that, you can always start an investigation at the regulators level also. Because, and finally, my humble and honest recommendation to Modi government is this is not a hill you want to die on. This is not a cause that you want to actually go down for. But rest assured that if these things are not taken care of, stat, you're doomed. You're dooming your country's future. You're dooming most of us as well, our future as well. And buddy, what you'll do to our children, you will never be forgiven. And your own people, your own ideological, associates will hunt you down. So better wake up and do something now. And other ideas like diversions, creating these diversions, like um, asking, sending ED after Rahul Gandhi. You do realize that whosoever is giving you this capital idea is not your friend because it is certainly a trap. There's enough angst on the street that if something of that sort happens, people will come on streets and they will really, really create problems for you. Remember that the whole idea of actually of fall of civilization and after that the rich people actually surviving um, in their ivory castles. Two thought experiments I will need from you to actually understand that it is not a tenable model. One, actually, it happened in real time before our eyes. The other one is a movie. But the first one that is important is what happened in Bangladesh. Here's Hasina Wajid, all set, internationally well connected, has appointed, has been there for two terms, has dismantled most of the infrastructure of opposition, um, has her own, she is the one who appointed Chief Justice, she is the one who appointed Army Chief, she is the one who appointed most of the heads of various state institutions. She is well protected. and there is a lot of buffer between her and the people. But once people come to streets, she had to flee, she had to resign, or then she could have actually seriously compromised her own physical safety. So don't think that no matter how big technology becomes, you will be able to survive if the civilization collapses, right? The other one, and I think that is a great, movie on the connection, although it is about a doomsday scenario. But the nexus between big business and corrupt business, particularly with corrupt intentions and corrupt what politicians. And it is called "Don't Look Up." Um, they keep on saying that there's no imminent threat, no imminent threat. Then all of a sudden, when the world is collapsing and people are dying, they escape into space through a special rocket, and then they keep on traveling. Eventually, they reach some civilization, some planet which is habitable, and there the president is eaten by a predator. So remember, all these selfish ideas, all this greed will take you nowhere. Start cooperating with the authorities and stop actually trying to dismantle regulators and regulatory frameworks. If you don't do that, buddy, it's your funeral. Because people like me, we allowed you to do, these atrocities to us, but our children are out of bound. We are not going to let them suffer like we suffered. This was today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I have already requested you to subscribe to this channel. Also, kindly hit the bell icon. And also, in case you haven't noticed, there is on this side all my socials are flashed throughout the program. And in on this side, you can see this, um, uh, what do you call it, this scannable image that takes you to my WhatsApp channel. If you follow that, I keep on updating my content more frequently. Remember, today, once again, I'm doing this video in English because I want to assure you that I have no malice. I have no skin in the game regarding this big business and these political parties. I don't want to topple apple cart, but my problem is nobody is looking at the bigger picture. And if nobody does that, we all sleepwalk into precipice, or the precipice, into the precipice, right? Or the precipice, okay. But this is what I'm saying. Please understand, India has a great opportunity. When this video actually is published, by that time Indian markets would have been closed, and then there's Independence Day. So of course markets, I don't think they will be open. So once again, there's enough buffer to ensure that something can be done. So I'm not contributing to any instability. I'm just trying to help you see what big challenges there are, and they are going to grow only in coming days. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.